Hashtag the unexpected family. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you least expect it. This story touched my heart. I know it will touch yours too. Like and subscribe for more heartwarming content that reminds us of the power of human connection. ****. The cafe buzzed with afternoon chatter, but Mark Sullivan sat alone, his tea growing cold as he stared at the empty chair across from him. 3 years as a single father, and still, some days the loneliness felt as fresh as the day Sarah left. His phone lit up with a text from the babysitter. His 7-year-old son Ethan was doing fine, already asking when Dad would be home. Mark smiled faintly, grateful for his son but allowing himself this rare moment of solitude. He didn't notice the 3 identical little girls watching him from the corner booth until they were suddenly standing beside his table, matching blue dresses and identical braided pigtails. The one in the middle, seemingly their spokesperson, leaned in and whispered with surprising intensity, "Pretend you're our father." Mark blinked, teacup frozen halfway to his lips. "I'm sorry, what?" "Please," the girl on the left added, her eyes darting nervously toward the cafe entrance. "Just for a few minutes." Before Mark could respond, the third triplet had already climbed into the chair opposite him, arranging her napkin primly on her lap as if she belonged there. The other 2 quickly followed, squeezing together on the seat meant for one adult. "I don't think," Mark began, but the middle triplet cut him off. "I'm Lily, that's Rose, and that's Violet," she said, pointing to her sisters. "We're 8. Our mom is over there talking to that man in the blue jacket. He keeps coming to our house, and we don't like him." Mark glanced discreetly toward the counter where a harried-looking woman with the same chestnut hair as the girls was engaged in what appeared to be an uncomfortable conversation with a well-dressed man who stood too close, his hand possessively on her elbow. "Girls, I can't just pretend to be your father. Your mother would." "She won't mind," Rose insisted. "She's too nice to tell him to go away." "But he'll go away if he thinks she has a husband." Mark felt a pang of recognition. After Sarah left, he'd experienced his share of uncomfortable situations where a simple wedding band might have spared him unwanted complications. "What's your mom's name?" he asked quietly. "Eleanor," Violet supplied. "Eleanor Chen." Mark nodded, making a split-second decision that he hoped wouldn't end with him being arrested. "All right, but just for a minute, and then we explain everything to your mom, okay?" The triplets nodded solemnly, their identical faces breaking into relieved smiles. "So, girls," Mark said in a deliberately louder voice, "how was school today?" The transformation was immediate. The girls launched into animated stories about their day, speaking over each other with the comfortable chaos of family. Mark found himself genuinely laughing at their antics, momentarily forgetting the charade. It took less than 2 minutes for Eleanor Chen to notice her daughters sitting with a stranger. Mark watched her expression shift from confusion to alarm as she excused herself from the man and hurried toward their table. "Girls! What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Mommy!" Lily exclaimed. "We were just talking to Dad about our science project." Eleanor's eyes widened, and Mark quickly stood, extending his hand. "Mark Sullivan. I mean, your daughters asked me to," he lowered his voice. "They were trying to help you with that situation." He nodded subtly toward the man at the counter, who was watching them with narrowed eyes. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face, followed by embarrassment and then, surprisingly, relief. "Oh. Mark, yes, thank you for watching the girls while I got our coffees." She played along seamlessly, placing a protective hand on Violet's shoulder. The man at the counter observed them for another moment before gathering his things and leaving, the bell above the door jingling his departure. Eleanor sank into the chair Mark offered, burying her face in her hands. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I can't believe they did this. We were helping." Rose protested. "By involving a complete stranger in our personal business?" Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "That was dangerous and inappropriate. Actually, Mark said, surprising himself, I have a 7-year-old son who would probably do something similar if he thought I needed help. They were just looking out for you. Eleanor studied him, wariness giving way to cautious gratitude. Still, I apologize for the imposition. Girls, please thank Mr. Sullivan, and then we need to have a serious talk about boundaries. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, the triplets chorused, not looking particularly remorseful. Mark smiled. It was my pleasure meeting you all. He hesitated, then added, I come here most Thursdays when my son is at his chess club. If you ever want to join me, properly, with your mother's permission, I'd enjoy the company. Eleanor looked startled, then thoughtful. That's very kind, but... Mom, please? Lily interrupted. He's nice, and he has a little boy. Who might like to meet you 3 troublemakers someday, Mark added with a wink. Something in Eleanor's expression softened. Perhaps. Thank you again, Mr. Sullivan. Mark, please. Mark. She smiled, and for the first time, he noticed her eyes, warm amber flecked with gold. I'm Eleanor. As they gathered their things to leave, Violet turned back and whispered, see you next Thursday, with such certainty that Mark couldn't help but smile. He watched them go, 3 identical blue dresses and their elegant mother, feeling strangely lighter than he had in years. His cold tea forgotten, he pulled out his phone to text the babysitter that he was heading home early. Somehow, the empty chair across from him didn't seem quite so empty anymore. Mark didn't really expect them to return the following Thursday, but he found himself arriving at the café earlier than usual, choosing a larger table by the window. He brought a book but found himself checking the door every few minutes. At precisely 4 o'clock, the bell jingled, and there they were, the triplets in matching yellow dresses this time, with Eleanor following behind, looking both amused and slightly embarrassed. The girls have been talking about nothing else all week, she explained as they approached. I hope we're not intruding. Not at all, Mark said, standing to greet them. I was hoping you'd come. The girls immediately began rearranging the chairs to their liking, chattering about their week. Eleanor watched them with a mixture of exasperation and fondness. They're quite a handful, she said softly. I can imagine. One 7-year-old keeps me busy enough. Where is he? Lily asked, suddenly noticing the absence of the promised boy. Chess club, Mark explained. It runs until 5:30 on Thursdays. I hate chess, Rose declared. You've never played chess, Eleanor pointed out. I would hate it if I played it, Rose insisted, making Mark laugh. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Mark learned that Eleanor was a pediatric physical therapist who had moved to the city 3 years ago after her divorce. The triplets were in 3rd grade at Oakwood Elementary, the same school his son Ethan attended, though in different classes. Single parenting 3 8-year-olds, Mark shook his head in admiration. You deserve some kind of medal. Eleanor smiled. Some days I feel like I deserve a straitjacket. But we manage. She hesitated. And you? The girls mentioned you're raising your son alone? Mark nodded. My wife left when Ethan was 4. She decided family life wasn't for her after all. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, and the simple sincerity in her voice touched him. It was hard at first, but we found our rhythm. He's an amazing kid. Serious, thoughtful. Sometimes I worry he had to grow up too fast. Children are resilient, Eleanor said. More than we give them credit for. Their eyes met in shared understanding, and Mark felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years, the unspoken bond of 2 people who had weathered similar storms. The moment was broken by Violet tugging on her mother's sleeve. Can we invite them for dinner? Please. Eleanor blushed. Violet, that's not. Actually, Mark said, surprising himself again, maybe we could meet at the park sometime? Let the kids get to know each other. The hopeful expressions on the triplets' faces were impossible to resist, and Eleanor found herself agreeing to a Saturday playdate. As they were leaving, Mark impulsively asked for Eleanor's number, just to coordinate for Saturday, he explained quickly. She hesitated only briefly before reciting it, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Ethan was skeptical about meeting the triplets. 3 girls? At once, he asked, adjusting his glasses with a dubious expression. They're nice girls, Mark assured him as they walked to the park that Saturday. And they're excited to meet you. Because I'm a boy? Ethan asked suspiciously. Mark laughed. Because you're you. The triplets spotted them the moment they entered the park, rushing over in a flurry of different colored dresses. For the first time, Mark could tell them apart immediately. Lily in green, Rose in red, and Violet in purple. You must be Ethan. Lily declared, studying him with interest. Do you like frogs? Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. Yes. Good. We found one by the pond. Come see. Before Mark could intervene, the girls had surrounded his son and were leading him away, already chattering about their discovery. Ethan glanced back once, looking bewildered but not unhappy, and Mark gave him an encouraging nod. They're like a force of nature, Eleanor said, appearing beside him with a picnic basket. I hope they don't overwhelm him. He could use a little overwhelming, Mark admitted. He spends too much time with adults. They found a bench where they could watch the children, who were now crouched by the pond's edge, heads bent together in serious consultation over something in Violet's cupped hands. They look like they're plotting world domination, Eleanor observed. With those 4 minds combined, they might succeed, Mark replied, making her laugh. The afternoon passed with surprising ease. The children moved from frogs to the playground to an elaborate game involving the collection of specific types of leaves. Mark and Eleanor talked about work, parenting challenges, books they'd managed to read in stolen moments, and the best takeout places for busy weeknights. He's different with them, Mark noted as he watched Ethan patiently explaining something to Rose, who was listening with rapt attention. More confident. And they're actually sharing with him, Eleanor marveled. That's new. When it was time to leave, the children protested vigorously. Can we do this again tomorrow? Lily asked. I have homework, Ethan said seriously, then added, but maybe next weekend? The adults exchanged glances. I think that could be arranged, Eleanor said. As they gathered their things, Rose suddenly announced, we should all have dinner together. At our house. Rose, Eleanor began warningly. Please, Mom. Ethan can show us his chess set, and we can show him our science books. I'd like that, Ethan said quietly, surprising his father. Mark looked at Eleanor, who seemed torn between propriety and her daughter's obvious enthusiasm. No pressure, he said softly. But Ethan and I would be honored. Eleanor's resistance crumbled. Friday night? Nothing fancy. Friday would be perfect, Mark agreed, ignoring the triumphant looks the triplets exchanged. Dinner at the Chen's apartment became a weekly tradition. Sometimes Mark cooked, bringing over ingredients to prepare his specialty pasta that even the pickiest of the triplets, Rose, would eat without complaint. Other times, Eleanor would showcase her family's traditional Chinese recipes, teaching both Mark and Ethan how to use chopsticks properly. The children grew closer, forming an unlikely quartet. Ethan taught the girls chess, and they introduced him to their elaborate imaginative games. Mark watched his serious son laugh more in those months than he had in years. And Mark and Eleanor found in each other something neither had been looking for, a friend who understood the unique challenges they faced, who didn't judge their parenting decisions or offer unsolicited advice, who simply listened and supported. Their friendship deepened gradually, built on shared experiences and mutual respect. Mark found himself texting Eleanor during difficult days at work, and she called him when the girls were being particularly challenging. They developed inside jokes and could communicate volumes with just a glance when one of the children said something unintentionally hilarious. It was Ethan who first put words to the shift in their relationship, asking one night as Mark tucked him in, "Do you like Ms. Eleanor?" Like her? Mark paused, caught off guard by his son's perceptiveness. "I care about her very much," he answered carefully. "She's become a good friend." Ethan considered this. "The girls say their mom smiles more since we started coming over. Does that bother you?" Mark asked, suddenly concerned. "No," Ethan said thoughtfully. "I smile more too." 6 months after that first cafe encounter, Mark found himself back at the same table, waiting nervously. Eleanor had suggested meeting there, just the two of them, while her mother watched all 4 children. "It feels like we've come full circle," she said when she arrived, sliding into the seat across from him. "Except this time, there are no triplets hiding behind the potted plants," Mark joked, having spotted the girls on their first few cafe meetings attempting to supervise from various poorly concealed locations. Eleanor laughed, then grew serious. "Mark, I wanted to talk to you about something." His heart sank. This was it, she was going to tell him they needed space, that the children were becoming too attached, that they needed to step back. "These past months have been unexpected," she continued. "When the girls first approached you that day, I was mortified. I never imagined it would lead to this." "Eleanor," Mark began, wanting to assure her he understood if she needed to pull back. "Let me finish," she said gently. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our families. The girls adore you and Ethan. And I." She took a deep breath. "I've come to care for you both very much." Mark stared at her, hope rising cautiously. "We care about you too. All 3 of you. I know our situation is complicated. 4 children between us, our past experiences, the logistics of blending families." She twisted her napkin nervously. "But I find myself wondering if maybe, someday, we might consider." "Yes," Mark said simply. Eleanor blinked. "Yes?" "To whatever you were going to suggest. Taking things to the next level. Seeing where this goes. Being more than friends. All of it." A slow smile spread across Eleanor's face. "You didn't let me finish." "Sorry," Mark said, not looking sorry at all. "It's just, I've been thinking the same things. Wondering if it was too soon, if you felt the same way." Eleanor reached across the table, taking his hand. "The girls have been not so subtly hinting that they wouldn't mind if you were actually their father." Mark laughed. "Ethan asked me last week if we were going to be a real family soon." "And what did you tell him?" "That it wasn't just my decision to make." Mark squeezed her hand. "But that I hoped so." Eleanor's eyes shimmered. "I hope so too." Their first official date was to a movie, while Eleanor's mother watched the children. Their second was a dinner at a restaurant far nicer than either had been to in years. By the third, they stopped pretending they weren't already deeply involved in each other's lives and instead took all 4 children to the zoo, holding hands as they walked behind the excited group. The transition from friends to something more was both monumental and surprisingly natural. The children accepted the development with the matter-of-fact resilience of youth, as if they had expected it all along. "Does this mean Ethan will be our brother?" Violet asked one evening as they all worked together to prepare dinner. Eleanor and Mark exchanged glances. "Would you like that?" Eleanor asked carefully. All 3 triplets nodded enthusiastically. Ethan, setting the table with careful precision, added quietly, "I already think of them as my sisters." Mark felt his heart swell as he watched Eleanor kneel to hug her daughters, then include his son in the embrace. This unexpected family that had formed around them, not replacing what they had lost, but creating something new and precious. 1 year to the day after the triplets had approached Mark in the cafe, he returned with all 4 children in tow, leaving Eleanor at home with the excuse of needing